Hello, my name is Drew Kitt. I'm very grateful to be a part of this event, the Cannabis Science and Industry Congress here in San Jose, Costa Rica. And I've been asked to speak to you about one of the things that I do in the industry, and that is CBD retail. So I'll do a little overview about myself, kind of things that I'm involved in, and then we'll jump right into it and we'll talk about the CBD retail business. So I originally got involved in the hemp industry over 25 years ago. I managed one of the states here in the U.S., Vermont. There was the Vermont Hemporium. There were 3 retail locations. This is back in the mid 90s. It was a different industry back then. It preceded CBD, so things have certainly changed. But I was actively involved in the hemp space, but it was illegal. And it took another 25 years for it to be legal. I got involved in doing some importation of product to distribute more on the fiber side of the industry, but it was challenging being that it was an illegal space. So I'm very happy to hear that Costa Rica is looking to legalize cannabis and hemp, and of course, wish you all the best and hope that there's much success and would love to be a part of it. In addition to CBD retail, so it became legal in December of 2018. So January of 2019 is when I opened my retail shop, Two Moons CBD. It was a quick and easy way to get involved in the industry. I'd also been and still am involved with the International Hemp Exchange, distributing genetics, hemp seeds. And I can speak to that. I'll touch on that towards the end of this presentation, just so you're all aware of it. I am a certified ganjier, which is an educational program I was involved in, essentially a master of cannabis service. I'll touch on that towards the end as well. I'll mention my being a brand ambassador for a distribution company, as well as the Global Hemp Association, which I'm involved in doing research for fiber varietals. But let's get into the CBD retail side. So here's a picture of my shop. It's a very humble boutique craft type shop. It's focused on CBD and wellness. So there are many different places here in the US. And I should say everything that I'm going to be speaking to you about is specific to the US, obviously, because that's where I am. So things may be different where you are as your industry develops. But I wanted to share with you what things that I've learned about being involved here in the US as an owner-operator of my small, humble shop, which also serves as an office for me. It's conveniently located near my home. I have about 150 different products that I source from about a dozen local brands, as well as a dozen national brands. And I don't have any of my own products. So I'm not a manufacturer. I'm not producing my own products, but I represent others in the industry, again, both nationally and locally, because I think it's important for local farmers who do not have a brick and mortar retail shop to have someone that represents their products. So high level overview, when we talk about CBD, that is a cannabinoid that is in the cannabis plant, one of over 100. And, we focus on the whole plant, not just one cannabinoid, but that's what's become very popular. Here in the US, they discovered that humans have an endocannabinoid system and that it provides homeostasis or balance because of the CB1 and CB2 receptor. So it really helps with a number of things. But the FDA, which is the Federal Drug Agency, basically, we are not allowed to make any claims. We cannot tell anybody that CBD or any cannabis contents will help you with anything, which is very difficult to educate a consumer when you can't explain. But we do refer to reports and research that have been done in other countries like Israel. And one of the things that I will do is I refer to some posters that are on the wall of my shops. I'll even go back and mention, you can see there's some posters there. One is about terpenes, another one is cannabis, and the third one speaks to some of the benefits, that, again, based on research that has been shown to help people, which I'll touch on and talk to you about. I'll also talk about all the different product types that are in my display cases. So cannabis is the plant. It's made up of over 100 different cannabinoids and over 100 different terpenes. Hemp here in the US has been federally legal as of the end December of 2018 through the US Farm Bill, and it is defined as having less than 0.3% delta 9 THC by dry weight. And that's an important thing to mention because the difference between it and 0.4% is something that is a federally controlled substance and illegal, or a legal product. But dry weight is also another interesting part of the definition, and I can touch on that later as well as we talk about some of the different product categories. When we talk about cannabis or hemp, there's really three primary ways to produce these products, or the plant, which is the cultivar. So what type of plant are you growing? The cultivator, who is growing it, and the methodology, how are they growing the plant? And I'll talk a little bit about more when we're talking about smokable hemp products. But the cultivar is important to understand, and I'm not going to do a deep dive since we're talking about retail, but you just keep in mind that cannabis, and again, hemp below that threshold, can produce cannabinoid type. So we're talking about the buds, the flower that contains the cannabinoids and the terpenes. You can also produce grain or the seed for protein for foods, or the stalk, which is your fiber or your herd. So that's other plant types, still hemp, still cannabis, but you're going to grow different cultivars when you're talking about CBD products. There's also different plant characteristics. So common terms within the industry are sativa, which is a more uplifting effect, indica, more relaxed, or hybrid. Really, most of the plants that are on the market today are hybrids. They've been breeding these plants for years, and the effect, whether it's uplifting or relaxing, is a combination of your cannabinoids and your terpenes. Cannabinoids such as CBD have been shown to be more relaxing, so a higher percentage of that cannabinoid in the plant can result in you feeling more relaxed, whereas THC can be more uplifting for some people. And therefore, if a plant has, like in your country, I believe they're looking at going to 1% instead of 0.3%. So you'll be able to produce a different range of product types as it relates to the percentage of cannabinoids, which can mean different effects for different consumers. Terpenes are the aroma. So when you smell cannabis, it's very distinctive. It's made up of those terpenes, which have that nose, that aroma, as well as flavor. Primary terpenes, 95% of all terpenes from within cannabis are made up of myrcene and caryophyllene. Those are going to be more relaxing. Limonene and terpinolene are going to be more uplifting, and pinene is more focused. So when you're dealing with the different flower and those different aromas and flavors, you're also going to have different effects. And again, a combination of terpenes and cannabinoids, if you know what's in that, you'll be able to help the consumer and direct them or suggest to them different products and for different effects. There's also flavor profiles, which tend to be four. You're going to have either more of a fruity flavor, more floral, more fuel, or more earthy. And again, that's just going to be kind of consumer preference. But if you're sourcing flower to be able to sell on your shelf, you'll want to be able to diversify your product so that you can have more balanced offerings. So not all of the flower that you have is have any one specific characteristics, but more of a range. So this way consumers have more product options and can select different types of flower. Cannabinoids, as mentioned, there's over 100, and the most common being CBD, but you can breed the plant to produce other what's considered more minor cannabinoids, but are becoming more primary as well, like CBG, which has different effects. There's also CBN, obviously THC, which is more of the psychoactive. And then there's acidic forms, so like CBDA or CBGA, which also have different attributes, different benefits. as well as variant forms like THCV, which is not psychoactive and more of a stimulant. But again, a lot of research about this plant as they're discovering, and everything that I mentioned is naturally occurring in the plant. However, there are also lab produced cannabinoids. So what the industry has figured out is that by extracting CBD isolate in a lab using heat, pressure, time, and solvents, that CBD isolate can be converted into other cannabinoids like CBN, which, although it's naturally in the plant, it's just at lower levels, so it's more cost effective to convert it in a lab. You can also produce other psychoactive products like Delta 8 or Delta 10, which, because of the definition of the law here in the US, it specifies Delta 9. So by producing Delta 8, it's providing consumers with products that are psychoactive, which they might be interested in, but it's really important to understand how these products are being made, because you can be using solvents that are not healthy to consume, or when converting CBD isolate to some of these other Delta products, they may not be a high quality conversion rate, so it's not as pure as it should be. There's also people producing products or cannabinoids that aren't naturally in the plant, like THCO, which is an acetate. So these are just things to be aware of. There's a lot to learn about the plant, and you really need to do a lot of research and do your homework to understand, if you want to get into this industry, to know what you're providing to consumers, because some of them can be very helpful, others not so much so. So let's talk about that. Laws and regulations. Again, it's really important to understand what are in these products. Product labels provide that information. There's also QR codes that you can pull up lab results, which I'll talk about here in a minute. You also need to be aware, at least from my experience here in the US, it's been a challenge as far as banking, because cannabis above that 0.3% Delta 9 THC is still a Schedule 1, a federally controlled substance. And so the banking industry is having a hard time being able to distinguish, looking at the plant, what's legal and what's not. So there's some risk there. And that's also true for insurance, as well as it's important to have security with any, being an owner or operator of a shop. When you have inventory, you really want to protect your investment. So that's something you should look into. As far as product type, there's a lot of products out on the market. At least here in the US, we'll see who's producing what in Costa Rica or who's importing what products. But my suggestion is really to focus on high quality products and price it fairly. This way the consumers can get a beneficial product at a fair price. Also, it's important to have a wide selection to give consumers options and choices. When you may start out, with a small selection, but over time you can build and add different products based on what's selling well for you. But you always don't want to necessarily add new things without keeping a consistent inventory, because over time you're going to develop some customer loyalty, and they're going to have expectations when they come into the shop maybe once a month for a product type that they found that works well for them, that they're going to want to continue to get access to that product. So it's important when purchasing inventory to be able to manage it in a way that allows for consistency. I had mentioned COAs, which is an acronym for a certificate of. So this is going to be a third-party lab that does testing on the products to be able to identify that cannabinoid profile to make sure that you're compliant, as well as the percentage of cannabinoids that's in the product. It's also can look at terpenes, so that terpene profile, to understand which are some of those primary terpenes, so that you can know if it's going to be more uplifting or relaxing for the consumer, as well as other things that could potentially be in the products that need to be tested for, such as pesticides or heavy metals like lead, or mycotoxins, which are going to be mold and mildew. Because these products are produced from plant material, it degrades and it could be a poor quality, and you don't want consumers getting sick from your products. So it's really important to make sure that all of the products that you're purchasing for your shop or producing have third-party lab tests. When the customer comes into the shop, you really need to engage with them. As I mentioned, they may be coming into your shop specifically because there's a reason and they've heard that CBD or cannabis or hemp can potentially help them. So understanding their experience, what they've heard, what their interests are, and whether or not they've tried CBD before. A lot of cases, people say that they've tried it, but they may have tried a product that had a low percentage or a small number of milligrams, and they actually didn't feel the benefit because it may not have been enough for them, or they may have tried a different product that didn't work for them. Whereas, if they tried a topical but not a tincture, there's a big difference as far as the potential effect. So it's important to understand what the customer's experience is and products that they may have tried, as well as their budget. You don't want to try to sell a high dollar price to someone if they're really just wanting to spend a small amount and try it for the first time. Whereas some people are definitely want to pay a premium for, in our case, a USDA, a certified organic product that's just a much higher quality, or a more recognized brand that's at a higher price point. They might want to go for the best product regardless of price. So active listening is really important. And that's, there's so much information to share, like I'll be sharing with you today. But if you just start spewing out and sharing a lot of information without checking in with the listener to understand and get some cues from them, you don't want to sell someone a sleep product if they came in because of anxiety. In fact, if you're sharing too much information with them, that could make them a little anxious. So that's why asking them what their intention and what their interest is, and listening, and then steering them towards a product based on your product knowledge to something that fits more with what they're interested in. So that's why it's important to know your product and understand what the customer is interested in, to be able to do intentional pairing or providing them with a product that may be of best benefit. As mentioned, I can't say that any of these products are going to provide any of these benefits, but some of the common research has shown that CBD can help with anxiety. It could help alleviate pain because it's been shown to be an anti-inflammatory. So inflammation in the body can cause pain or discomfort. Sleep is another big issue for a lot of people. But again, is it falling asleep or is it staying asleep? And the difference being, when should you take the product, and in order to identify how it can best help that person. Other times people are just taking CBD or other hemp-derived products for general wellness, as much as one might want to take vitamin C, or if they're anemic, if they don't have enough iron, they may need to eat more spinach. You don't necessarily feel the benefit, but it's good for your system. So someone might want to take it like a multivitamin, like a gummy daily. And as mentioned, there are some psychoactive products, which means that you'll feel high from it. A lot of people like to feel high. Others don't want to feel high at all. Others have jobs that they get drug tested, and if there's any THC in their system, they could potentially lose their job. So it's really important to understand that and identify that. And you can sell products to people that don't have any THC at all. And I can mention that later. With edibles specifically, or with any product, it's important to what we call low and slow, which means start with a low dosage and take your time increasing to identify what could work best for you. This is especially true with edibles like gummies, because once you take it, you took it, and it may take up to an hour to feel the effect. But if you take too much, especially with a psychoactive product, you can have a bad experience and you'll never want to buy any more. So it's important to let people know to start with less, but with a low dose, they may not feel it, and therefore they may not think it's working for them. It's important to explain that you could take more over time. But identifying a minimum effective dose is ideal, because the consumer may be, especially with a budget, if you're taking too much too often, that's going to become less cost effective. So again, explaining this to consumers, and also that they can increase tolerance over time if they're taking the same dose, it may become less effective over time, and they might either need to increase that dosage or stop taking it for a week or two and let their body reset. Marketing is a challenge in the industry, specifically with social media, Facebook, Instagram, Google ads. They don't necessarily like our products, and you could lose your account. So it's just wanting to mention that and be aware. Customer referrals tend to be the best. So that's why taking the time with each customer, they'll appreciate your understanding and knowledge of the product and that you're really focused on helping them. And they're going to tell their friends and they're going to come back for more if it works for them. So that's why it's really important as far as customer loyalty to make that connection with them and let them know that you know your products and you're there to help them. There are many things to do in this industry. So I've been talking about CBD retail, but it's important to understand that you could be more vertically integrated, which means you could be a cultivator, you can grow the plant, you can manufacture products. So you can extract oils from that plant, you can put them into gummies or edibles. If you don't want to be a manufacturer or a cultivator, well, then you can be a distributor. You can identify some great products to import or work with manufacturers and distribute those to other retail shops, or you can be a retailer or any combination of these things, including e-commerce. So having an online website. But it is important to know that any and each one of these different parts within the supply chain is a business into itself, and it's best to not try to get into doing too much too soon. Really start with one thing and become really good at it and then expand over time. So product types. So I showed a picture of my shop. It had three different, looking at the time, it had three different display cases. And the way that I set up my shop, one of those is going to be made up of a smokable products, like the flower, just the raw buds from the plant, and vape products, which vape cartridges have the distillate, the extract in it, but it's still a smokable product. COAs, like I said, are important, the certificates of analysis to understand those cannabinoids and the terpenes, as well as to make sure there aren't the pesticides, mold, or if the plant material is too moist, that's when you can get mold. It can also be too dry, which can be more harsh. So it's important how you're storing your smokable flower. Appearance is important. So they talk about like bag appeal or shelf appeal. That has to do with the different colors of the product. Some flower can be purple, other can be bright green. If it's brown, that's generally not perceived as of a high quality. There's also how you trim that flower. So if it's a loose trim and it looks kind of raggy, it's not clean looking, or you can over trim. If you shave it or make it too tight of a trim, then you cut into those trichome heads that have the oils and have the terpenes, and that aroma is volatile. It evaporates easily. So if you over trim your flower, then you lose the nose, which is that aroma. So it's important to have high quality appearance of flower. The aroma is potent, but it can dissipate over time. Flavor is something that you need to try. So, you can see and smell the flower, but having a pre-roll is something good to offer your consumers. So this way they can spend less to try some flower to see how they like it and to experience it. And ultimately, it's going to be a combination of those four things for the consumer to determine whether or not they like the flower that you're offering. I had mentioned that there's different, the cultivar and then the cultivator and then methodology. So cannabis can be sun grown, just out of full sun in living soil. But if it's too rainy or too moist, it can be issues as far as pesticides and disease. So that's why putting it into a greenhouse where it's protected from the outdoor elements. You can also use light dep, which is light deprivation, which uses artificial light or mixed light, a combination of sunlight and mixed light. to be able to get more than one cycle when you're growing flower, or you can do true indoor, all under artificial or LED lights or high sodium lights. So there's different product for flower specifically. It can be grown in different ways. There isn't one way that's better or worse than another. It tends to do with consumer preference, but also the effect and the flavor and the appearance. It's really, at the end of the day, you want to have a variety to offer and let your consumer decide which they like best. I mentioned vapes, which are going to be cartridges. It's very standardized. It's called a 510 thread that screws into your battery to be able to heat up the coil that then will vaporize the oil that's in the cartridge, the distillate, which is why they call it vapes, because it's vaporization. There's different potencies, different purities. They also use different carriers, meaning they thin the distillate potentially with MCT oil or coconut oil. They could also use vegetable glycerin, VG, other thinners that aren't necessarily good for you. Ideally, you want to just have distillate with some terpenes and not have any of these carriers. So moving on, tinctures and oils. So those are going to be extracted naturally from the plant using either ethanol, CO2, which is using pressure, or using solventless extraction. So different extraction types, full spectrum, meaning the whole plant's being extracted. There's also broad spectrum, which means that they remediate out or they remove THC. As I had mentioned earlier, some people cannot have any THC in their system. So to understand that and be able to offer products that are considered more broad spectrum, or isolate. So when you're talking about an isolate, they're isolating just CBD or just CBG, in which case it's not the whole plant or full spectrum, it's just an isolate. And again, different people like different products, and it's just a matter of trying different oils to see what works best relative to what the intention is. There's also differentiation, like blending some of these products. So sleep or a sleep formulation may include CBD and CBN. So this way you have more than just one cannabinoid, but more primary cannabinoids and higher potencies. So when we talk about potency, an oil may have 500 milligrams in a 30 milliliter, which is going to be 17 milligrams per milliliter. A milliliter being a full dropper is kind of a standard dose. 1,000 milligrams in a 30 milliliter bottle is going to be 33 milligrams per milliliter. So understanding the dosage so that the consumer who may have tried 10 milligrams, but it didn't work for them, you might want to offer up a product that has 50 milligrams, but take half a dropper, which would be equivalent to 25 milligrams. So there's a lot to understand and know when you're talking about tinctures and dosages and also different product type or differentiation of those extracts. Edibles, gummies, or capsules. Capsules are just going to be the oil in a capsule form. Some people don't like the taste of the oil, which again goes directly in your mouth to get into your blood vessels. It's the easiest way to get into your system. For an edible, you're taking it orally. So once you take it, it filters through your liver and it can reduce some of the potency. So it might be a higher dosage for a capsule. Or for a gummy, you may explain to let the gummy dissolve in their mouth. And this way the content can get into that bloodstream before they swallow it. Some people like gummies because it's easier to take. It may taste better. It's also more standardized as far as the dosage. And you can have different ingredients in a gummy. So there's other product differentiation where you can infuse chamomile, which is relaxing, more for sleep, or you can infuse with ashwagandha, which is a mushroom, which may be more calming because it helps more with stress. So again, understanding different dosages, the ingredients, vegan, gluten-free, also that first pass as far as the potency. Onset needs to know that when taking an edible, it could take up to an hour to feel that effect. So you might want to start with less to see what that experience is before taking too much and potentially have a bad experience, especially if it's psychoactive. Topicals are going to be, you don't take them internally, it's more external. So we're talking about salves or balms or lotions. It's because it's external, it's better to apply to, like, for your lower back. If you have lower back pain, you're not dealing with a specific dosage so much as you're covering that surface area. But a lotion may be easier to apply to a lower back instead of like a salve, which may be better to put like on your temple if you have a headache, or onto your hands if there's arthritis. And again, not making claims, but these are what some of the people use. And you can also differentiate topicals based on ingredients like camphor, which has a heating effect, or menthol, which has a cooling effect. So a sore muscle gel might be used for after working out at the gym to help both with inflammation, soreness, as well as, again, just general wellness for your skin. That's kind of an overview of a lot of information that I hope was helpful as it related to some of the CBD retail products, but there are many others, and pet products. We can't forget about our furry friends. There are pet products too, because pets, like humans, have an endocannabinoid system, and cannabis has phytocannabinoids, which can help for many things potentially. So one of the things that I did, which I'm just going to touch on, which is called, it's a Ganjier certification. You could find ganjier.com if you want to learn some more information. It took a year. It was a very high level overview, but it did a deep dive into several different areas, such as the history of cannabis, the science, the botany, the genetics, those different cultivars, cultivation technique, how to grow, processing, how to extract and produce different products, as well as sales. So some of the things that I shared with you, and understanding the consumption of cannabis. Because at the end of the day, again, you want to be a trusted resource and a professional when dealing with these products, because they can truly help people in so many different ways. But if you don't care and you don't understand what it is that you're offering, you potentially hurt consumers as well. So you need to take that responsibility. And the more you know, I think the better you can help. I've also been retained as a brand ambassador, so I do a lot of distribution. I've traveled around to a bunch of different shops. Unfortunately, here in the US, it's an unregulated industry. So a lot of the things that I shared with you, I've learned and figured out and offered to my consumers the knowledge and the information, but there's many places that sell many products where the people selling those products don't understand what's in them, and consumers can potentially have a bad experience or just not receive the benefit that they could otherwise. So distribution is an important part of the industry, and being able to provide good products to different retail shops, and also doing market research is just something, if you want to get into this industry, you'll want to do. But you can add a lot of value by not only being a retail owner selling to consumers, but also being a distributor selling products to shops. And that's just another opportunity to consider. I'm going to touch on beyond the retail side of things. As I had mentioned, my colleague, Mike Liago, is another presenter here in Costa Rica at this event. So I encourage you to check out his presentation. But the International Hemp Exchange, we distribute genetics. So a lot of my knowledge has to do with an understanding of cannabinoid seeds, genetics. We also distribute grain and fiber varietals. We're involved in some processing technology, both for cannabinoids as well as on the fiber side, as well as post-processed material for fiber. So I just want to touch on that so that you're aware. And if you're interested, we can talk about other things than CBD and retail. But it's important to really understand the whole supply chain, because again, this is one plant, but it produces all sorts of different end uses, and it's highly complex, but lots of opportunities. So I encourage you to learn about all of the plant and what it has to offer the industry on many levels. Last thing, I'm involved with the Global Hemp Association. Mandy Kerr was down in Costa Rica as well. She is her association. I encourage you to check it out. I'm involved in their research committee, and we're doing some research trials this summer, specifically for fiber varietals. This plant performs differently in different regions, and it's daylight sensitive. So the plant responds to the sunlight, which is why earlier when I mentioned growing in a greenhouse using artificial light in order to be able to produce the plant more than one cycle a year, when you're growing outside at scale, certain genetics work better than others. And depending on what you're growing for, you can buy seeds that perform poorly for you. So it's important to understand how different varietals perform in different parts of, at least here in the US, different parts of the country relative to the latitude. So we're involved in doing some of that research to be able to identify how genetics perform. I encourage all of you, any of you interested in this industry, to find out who's doing research or find farmers that are growing, because it's really important to see this plant in the field, to touch it, to feel it, to smell it, to learn about it. And it's best to learn by doing, but to have experience and knowledge. A lot of people in this industry, like myself, are willing to share, to be able to provide you with information so that you can be successful, because we all need each other to be successful in growing and developing this industry. You can reach me, Drew Kitt, at renewablelegistics.com is kind of my umbrella company. And there you'll find information about Two Moons CBD, about the International Hemp Exchange, about the Global Hemp Association, and some other things that I'm up to. You're probably not going to want to call me, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I would love to connect with you, learn about your interests, what you're doing in Costa Rica or elsewhere, and any number of things that you might be interested in being involved in. And I would love to be able to help. I appreciate you listening today, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future. Adios.